Just a reminder, the folks in the back, if you'd like to come up front, we've got plenty of seats available.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Abington Heights School District School Board meeting of April 20th. Please rise and pledge your flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Abdallah?
Here.
Mr. Azar?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mrs. Henderson?
Here.
Mrs. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Badensky?
Here.
Mr. Robeson?
Here.
Mrs. Tierney?
Here.
Mr. Acker?
Here.
All present.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Madensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Can I please have a motion to approve the minutes of our meetings of February 16th and February 2nd? Is that right?
You should have Marches.
Excuse me, March 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, besides Mr. Abdallah? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Madensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Are there any board reports?
Yes, the Facilities Committee met on April 13th to begin mapping a strategy for centralizing outdoor sports facilities at the high school.
And yes, Mr. Acker, the IT committee met in March to discuss the different options for our website or potential website, depending on how the vote goes today. But we're looking, we went through multiple demos from different vendors, and we got pricing, and as the result of that meeting, there's something on the agenda for today.
Perfect, thank you. AEIO?
Yes, the AEIO had their April meeting. We approved funds for the Odyssey of the Mind to participate in the World's competition at the Iowa State University, and that's Memorial Weekend. And we also approved funds for both the high school and the middle school music department for them to replace some cellos.
Thank you. Are there any other board reports? Can we have the student representative, please?
Hi. Spring sports are underway and all teams have been doing great so far. The girls lacrosse team had a big upset win against Wyoming Seminary yesterday. The boys lacrosse team went to double overtime against North Pocono. Evan Davis scored the winning goal. The boys baseball team won against Valley View at PNC Field on Monday. The girls softball team has been doing extremely well, including a decisive win over defending District 2 champions West Scranton. Boys and girls track teams are also doing great, with the girls ranked as the top team in the area. Boys tennis is undefeated and are ranked #1 in the area. Boys volleyball is also ranked #1 in the area. Along with spring sports, our mock trial team won back-to-back state championships and are currently preparing for nationals. Nationals will take place May 5th through the 7th. The spring choir concert will take place this Sunday at the high school at 3 p.m. The orchestra spring concert will take place May 1st at the high school. Thursday, April 28th, we will be hosting a career fair in the main gym during all lunches. National Honor Society induction is scheduled for Tuesday, May 10th in the high school auditorium at 6 p.m. And junior-senior prom is scheduled for May 21st at Fiorelli's. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Schaefer, it's your turn.
All right, thank you, Mr. Acker. I am going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Vitale, who will be discussing our 5-year curriculum plan. After Dr. Vitale is done, I'm going to have a quick presentation regarding the recent work of our facilities committee.
Okay, thank you so much. So over the last few months, Dr. Schaefer's done a really nice job of framing our data and where we sit currently with our students. We thought that it would be important to kind of share where we're thinking our curricular work plan will be with curriculum assessment and instruction. So this is our 5-year plan. So before we start, we just think it's really important to remember that curriculum review includes a thorough analysis of data in each content area. We look at local assessments, benchmarks, and when we think of that, some may need to be created, added, or updated. As we review the curriculum, we need to look at our resources, and some may need to be purchased to support these updates, align with standards, and really support students based on all the data points that we've shared. Each year following a curricular review, so this school year we've done a curricular review in English Language Arts in English, and we'll be presenting a K-12 curriculum for board approval within the next few weeks. Next year, we will then work on professional development on how our teachers can appropriately implement that curriculum. So when you think of professional development, there will always be a year lag. So we'll write curriculum, and then the following year, we will do a lot of professional development to support that curriculum that we are currently implementing. So our long-range plan for the next 5 years is this year we're doing ELA. Next year, we will focus on math. The following year, we will focus on science, and the year after that will be social studies, and then 2025-26 is related arts. And the reality is that we have a finite amount of resources of people who can write and revise this curriculum, and we want to make sure that we are doing it very strategically and very thoroughly, so we're taking one at a time each year to make sure that we're doing it well and looking at all aspects of writing curriculum. So for this school year, we did write a K-12 curriculum for English Language Arts in English, and again, we'll be presenting that to the board. Because of needs at the high school, we wrote an AP Computer Science Principles, which again will be before the board. We rewrote 7th grade social studies. The 2 7th grade social studies teachers are working on that currently, and American Perspectives 1. So those needed immediate rewrites because we really needed to align them to what students needed to teach, and we saw some overlap or some gaps. When we think about professional development, we've done a lot of implementation and professional development with Wit and Wisdom, K to 8, phonemic awareness, K to 4, and then working on looking at what the standards are and what the instructional practices are in every other content area. So all of our professional development time this year has really been looking at what are we teaching currently, so what is that operational curriculum, which is what we currently actually teach in the classroom, and then how does that align to the standards, and is there overlap or are there gaps in that? So looking at next year, we will rewrite math, K to 12. We want to continue with some of the social studies, so we'll look at comparative world studies in 10th grade social studies. We are working to rewrite STEM, which is that Comet Connects and middle school STEM program, K to 8, just so it's a more cohesive program. And then we'll work on developing a stronger scope and sequence for our related arts in K to 12. Professional development will continue with Wit and Wisdom, and the professional development in the other areas will continue with a scope and sequence to ensure that there's vertical articulation between all the content that we teach. The following year, so 23-24, we will rewrite science and do American Perspectives 2, which is 11th grade class. And our focus will be on math instructional practices. Again, so we would have rewritten math the previous year. We will be implementing a new curriculum and possibly new resources, so we would want to offer significant amount of professional development as we do that. And then anything content specific for related arts. 24-25, we will rewrite social studies K to 12. So currently social studies is embedded through Wit and Wisdom in K to 6. We really want to look at that and have a better idea of how we're doing that. Most of the 7 through 12 will already have would have been rewritten, but we'll really get a good vertical articulation that year. We'll continue with math professional development and then science professional development as well, because the year prior we would have written a new curriculum and be implementing it in this year. 25-26, we will look at all of the related arts, K to 12, and work to make sure that we're writing a curriculum for each of those content areas. And then our professional development will be on instructional practices and then social studies implementation as we rewrite that curriculum the year prior. And then what we would like to do moving forward is a 6-year cyclical program. So every 6 years, we will not necessarily be overhauling, but reviewing our curriculum. That way it's a 6-year process. So every single 6 years, we are looking at each content area and ensuring that we are making sure it matches the standards, meeting our students' needs, and really teaching what our students need to know to be successful. So that is our curricular plan.
Dr. Fratelli, can you describe what you mean by spending a year rewriting curriculum? What does it take? What does it entail?
So that process is a pretty thorough process. So it starts with getting into what is currently being taught in each grade level. So we spent, I want to say the first month, getting a handle on, at the high school, what each English teacher is teaching and what that looks like. And then from there, like this year, we noticed that there was overlap in some of the texts or the novels that were being used. So we had to figure out exactly what the alignment was. From there, we look at the standards. So what are the standards say must be hit in every grade level? What is that eligible content and what do students need to know? And we define what mastery looks like at each grade level. And then from there, you start to develop a really comprehensive list of resources, activities that go along with those skills to develop the skills necessary to meet the standards, and that all takes a significant amount of time. It starts with, though, understanding what we're currently doing and understanding the data of where students are performing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Fratelli.
Yes.
There's a lot of professional development. How do you assess the success of that
So-
professional development?
The one way I would say would be through teacher evaluations. So as our administrators are in classrooms and they're starting to see what instructional practices are being used and what our teachers are doing and how they're implementing the resources and the curriculum that we're writing. That is one way. As an administrative team, we've also started instructional rounds where as a group, we go from building to building about every 3 weeks, and we spend time focusing on one specific area that's specific to that building. So tomorrow we'll be at the high school as an administrative team from Dr. Schaefer to the building principals, and we'll be going into classrooms and seeing what's happening and then having conversations of what we saw and what we're doing if that matches what we're offering professional development. Also, we're going to start to survey our teachers of professional development of one, what they feel they need, and two, if they feel that it has been effective.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you.
Dr. Vitale, thank you very much. Very good job.
Thank you.
Dr. Schaefer, any other comments?
Yeah, as Mr. Mirabelli is getting that ready, I'd like to thank Dr. Vitale and our administrators and our support teams for working so hard to put together this 5-year plan. This is something that our policy committee and our curriculum committees will be working on because it needs to be supported by policy. In investments. And I just want to reiterate something that Dr. Vitale mentioned, and really Mr. Medensky asked a great question about is, it's one thing to have an intended curriculum, and we've been working on a written curriculum. And in some aspects, in my professional opinion, that's the easy part. The difficult part is assessing your progress, and is there a difference between the intended and the implemented? And that really relies on some high-quality professional development where you provide your teachers with the opportunity to practice and receive feedback. And that's indeed why we have a teacher on special assignment and others helping out, because we need to think about the capacity that we need K-12 to provide our professionals with the feedback that they need. It's much like coaching. When I started out coaching, bad reps aren't good, right? And we want to make sure that we're there to provide that feedback in the moment versus providing some teachers with a written curriculum and not the level of support that's commensurate with those expectations. Okay, I'm going to talk about the work of our facility committee, really led by Mr. Fleming, and there is an action item up for board approval tonight. And I want to start off by providing some context into the discussions at the facilities committee meeting. We really started to talk about historically where some of our spending was and where we see some of our future spending. And when I say the future spending, I'm talking about the near future, and I'll get to that in a moment. And I really put it into 3 buckets. Teaching and learning, which is the reason for our being. We've spent or intend to spend $5.78 million through 23-24. That includes the purchase of $1.71 million worth of core resources, and that's ongoing. That's something that we've already done. Dr. Vitale mentioned wit and wisdom. We have some consumables out there in mathematics and science. So that's happening as we speak. And when we think about the 5-year plan, that's exactly why we have a 5-year plan, so we can predict when these investments arise. Next, we have $3.9 million in stimulus funds. Now, we had the option to use those funds in a myriad of ways. However, we decided to prioritize the teaching and learning. We knew that we needed teachers. We knew that we had a need for reading specialists. We knew that we had a need for some counselors, some math and reading interventionists. And we did that. We spent with some of our teachers. And those were investments into teaching and learning. And we'll have those funds for approximately 2 more years. And then we'll need to evaluate where we are and decide what's next. Next, I mentioned last week that we invested approximately $180,000 in the future, we hope to make some personnel adjustments that would accommodate a principal, counselor, and medical professional in every building. Now, we're not purchasing a new principal. We've made a lot of movements to optimize all of our staffing to make this happen. That is a very important investment in teaching and learning, and I would say a needed investment. Next, and I should back up and say, when I talk about that teaching and learning, these were funds that were taken from our general or operating budget. Next, in 1920, we did work on our track and field, approximately $1.8 million to do the synthetic turf. That was out of our capital reserve. This is a fund where we allocate funds just for that purpose, right, in our facilities. We also worked on a CSA roof, high school roof, South Abington roof. We've got tech upgrades, which you've been seeing over the last couple months, phone upgrades, security upgrades. We're also earmarking almost $500,000 for the results of our risk and vulnerability study. That yields about $2.8 to almost $3 million in investments. So already in the short term window, we have been investing in teaching and learning and facilities. When I think about the long term and the horizon, the board approved last month a K-12 facility assessment. The proposals have come in. Our facilities committee will be working on that to select a vendor. And the purpose of the K-12 facility assessment is for the board and administrative team to develop some long-term investment priorities for our facilities. We know through our discussions with families in the search for the superintendent, we know through our district-wide study, we know through the discussions that we have with folks out there in the community that we have a lot of work to do in some of our facilities. And that's exactly why we did the facility study, so we could strategically put a plan in place for a long-term investment. And I'm talking about this because really there are two streams here. Short-term investments, things that we can prioritize and do in the short term, and by the short term, I'm talking about the next 1 to 3 years. And then the long term, when we're taking a look at perhaps facility renovations, multiple facility renovations, where there's going to be a lot of project management. We have to be honest about our capacity to manage multiple projects. And we owe it to our public to be strategic about how we put the projects together in a way that meets our expectations for long-term outcomes, making sure that all of our students, all of our teachers, all of our administrators, all of our families have access to high-quality facilities and materials. Can you go 3? Which leads me to the reason I am talking about this, and this is a high school facility project that we talked about in our meeting. We really set out with a couple objectives in talking with our administrators and families, and one was to develop a multi-use stadium at the high school that would serve the entire district and community, and that would accommodate the whole student body. As it is right now, we can barely accommodate half of the student body. We have a wonderful state-of-the-art football field, multi-use field for soccer, lacrosse, and we owe it to our community and our students to make sure that we're able to put everybody in a safe place to use that. It is a wonderful outdoor facility, and we want to make sure that we're set up for the future. Next, we also want to create an all-purpose turf field behind the high school to accommodate multiple sports and events: softball, baseball, field hockey, extracurricular activities and groups, high school PE and health, marching band, unified sports, all potentially at the same time. We have a wonderful gift of space. That's something that not all districts have. However, one thing that I've noticed this year is our students hadn't had the opportunity to be on those fields. And they're crowded and they have to be inside. So part of our work today in considering a action item on the table is to have an engineering firm take a look at design, drainage, permitting, and what would need to happen in order to realize those objectives of having a multi-use field. This would come out of our capital reserve fund. I've already spoken about funds that we've used out of capital reserve to work on projects and facilities. And after those current projects, we have a current balance of approximately $4.5 million. So this is a project that we'd be taking on out of our capital reserve and thinking about strategically, keeping in mind that we have a long-term decision or decisions to make. So that's what I have tonight to frame that action item with Quad 3, which would be the first step in assessing our capability to achieve those objectives. Thank you.
Dr. Schaefer, thank you very much. And thanks very much to the Facilities Committee for doing a great job. Mr. Fleming, thank you. Okay, the next would be public participation. Mr. Sheehan, welcome. It's nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so all of you know me, I've been there, right? But for the benefit of those people who may not have any idea who I am, let me kind of reintroduce myself. My name is Tom Sheehan. I'm a resident of Waverly. I've been a resident of the Abington since 1968, when I arrived here to teach in the Abington Heights School District in the 6th grade at Waverly School. I was there for 7 years, and when the middle school opened, I moved over there. During that time, I also spent 6 or 7 years as a part-time policeman in the Abingtons, Dalton and South Abington Township. So I do have a genuine, sincere interest in the community, and particularly the children in the community. I got into teaching for all the right reasons. When I went into the military, I had no intentions of ever becoming involved in anything to do with schools. And in the early 60s, with all the protesting and rioting and burning and looting and murdering, I thought, you know, we got to do something. So that's when I decided that I wanted to be a teacher, and not just I didn't even want to get just to the high school. I wanted to get them when they were still young enough to try to make an impression on. So that's kind of my background. Last week, or the last meeting I was here, I presented to you some sample what would I call them, policies, the state and school district policies from other places around the country that would prohibit the teaching of anything that had to do with race, sex, ethnicity, including any of that in any of the teaching. You know, and I'm just kind of interested here with the superintendent's report about, and the Mrs. Vitale's report about curricular development and so on in the coming years. Now is the the time, really, when you really need to think about this, to create, I've been asking the board to create a written policy prohibiting the teaching of those things, anything to do with CRT. I know SEL is already in the curriculum, and from what I've been reading about it, there's a lot of corruption involved in that. And my contention is that for the last several decades, at least 60 years, 80 maybe, there has been a concerted effort of communist influence in America to try to change America's culture and political and economic policies. So the last meeting I presented those samples, and I know Mr. Fleming and Mrs. Tierney, you weren't here. If you didn't get copies, I want to make sure you get them, so let me know, please, if you didn't. All right, so anyway, I promised you that I would provide this list this list comes from a book titled The Naked Communist, A Current Communist Goal, that was published back in the late 50s. Now, either this man had, okay, my time up?
It's that if you could just wrap up, that would be fantastic.
Okay, all right. Either this man had was onto something, or he had a fantastic ability to make things up that came true. So anyway, I printed out this list. I have highlighted things that I think, you as a school board and we as a community ought to be thinking about. There are other things in here. You can go down with your pen and check off things that have already been accomplished. And it sets your hair on fire if you haven't already read this. If you would look at the third page here, number 41, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Among the things that are being taught in school, as I'm reading about, and other schools across the country, is this, this transgender stuff and sex preference and things like that. I think that's truly belongs, okay. And number 41, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents, attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. So this is the kind of stuff that's been going on for the last at least 80 years, maybe more like 100 years, and I'm asking you to do something to stop it in our community. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that cares to make a comment? Okay, moving on, let's move on to the action and discussion items. I request a motion to approve the bills.
So moved.
Second?
On the motion,
So
roll call, go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Request the board to approve, we have the treasurer's report, please.
Yes, you may. We started the cash balance at for the month of March at $20,321,910. We've had a total monthly revenue of $1,899,800, which left us a total cash available of $22,221,711. Our net disbursements were $6,036,323, which leaves us a cash balance going into April of $16,185,387.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments on the treasurer's report? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
The next order of business would be to go through the action and the personnel report. Dr. Schaefer,
All right, Mr. Ackert asks that the board consider for approval the personnel report, C, items 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. On the motion?
Oops, I'm sorry, I have a question on the chairperson resignations and then the chairperson appointments. Are these new positions? Or why are they resignating and new people are taking on the positions?
So there are department chair people for every content area, and Mrs. Rowe resigned because she felt that it would be more appropriate for Dr. Pryl to be the English chairperson, considering she has spent the entire year helping and assisting to write the curriculum. So this was a calculated effort, so to speak, between Mrs. Rowe trying to support Dr. Pryl's leadership and being a department chair.
Oh, I understand. She's not resigning. She's just resigning from being the chairperson. Okay, thank you.
Yes, no, Mrs. Rowe continues to teach for us and doing a wonderful job at it.
Great, thank you to hear that. Nice to hear it.
Any other questions? Any other questions or comments? Can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Ackert asks that the board consider approving the extended school year staffing list.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Ackert asks that the board consider approving the April 2022 volunteer list.
So moved.
Second. On the motion?
I have a question. It looks like there's a lot of volunteer parents for field trips. So are field trips all back and running? Oh, great to hear. Yeah, thank you.
This means visits to the zoo. And
Our students are going to have wonderful experiences this spring, yes.
wonderful. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Ackert asks the board consider for approval the daily rate change for Branich busing van 5B to $240 as of March 16, 2022. This increase is due to the addition of a midday run for special education purposes.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Ackert asks that the board consider approving the April tuition reimbursement report.
So moved.
Second. On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to dispose of any outdated and damaged curricular instructional resources.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the First National Bank of Clark Summit as the approved depository of funds in accordance with Board Policy Number 608, bank accounts as contained in item number 4.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the proposal for architectural design services from Quad 3 for work at the high school as contained in item number 5.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? I note, if I'm not mistaken, that the total on this particular proposal is $48,750
Yes.
plus, okay. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
No.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-1.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve a 5-year agreement with Intrado for website management, content, and school messenger services as contained in item number 6.
So moved.
Second. On the motion?
Just one clarification on this. It's not in this line item, but I think it is entailed in the agreement. Does it include PM time, project management time with the NEIU for implementation, or is that a separate item?
That'd be a separate item.
Mr. Robeson, can you, as the leader, can you share the quote price and what this is for?
Sure. So essentially, it would be a redo of our current website, which, isn't the best out there. Also, it looks at, over time, historically, we've been having point solutions for example, we have Remind for certain types of communication. That includes different rules for access and all that. What this will do, and by the way, the net is, it's actually cheaper, this option, but it's enhanced functionality on the website. And it also utilizes some of the technology that we already have. For example, Infinite Campus is our main source of data for our students. They call it maybe the ERP of HR, in terms of the student system of record. That ties into what we're doing with the new website. So basically, in a nutshell, we're getting new functionality, more streamlined functionality at a cheaper price.
Thank you.
The big thing is, I'm missing the big sell. The navigation will be way smoother. So if you want to find a school lunch, we tied our design to some of the feedback we got from some of the questionnaires that we sent out. So, the redesign has a purpose to it. Whereas now, if you want to find something, it just looks like a kind of a cluttered desktop, for lack of a better word.
So if approved tonight, when do you think it would be installed?
Oh, excellent question. So if we approve it today, we have a work plan in place that will get us to go live about a week or two before the start of next September, next school year. So that's the real goal, to get it in place for next school year.
And the quote price?
Is it,
$60,000 approximately?
$59,550.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson.
Approximately.
Over 5 years. Over 5 years.
Mr. Robeson, to you and the Technology Committee, a very good job, thank you, and also to Mr. Suma for everything you've done in this area. It's really needed.
And I just want to say, you know, this took a lot of time because we did our due diligence, as I mentioned in our committee recap. We looked at different vendors. We looked at the services, the design, the support, the navigation. So really a thank you to the committee members, and also Chris played a big role in it. So did Chris Schaefer. When I say Chris Suma, are the IT person, IT Chris, and Superintendent Chris. And Dr.
This is the
Vitale.
two Chris's is what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
the two
right?
Chris's, and of course, Jim Marabelli. So thank you all, because this is all on additional time, and the group really asked tough questions, and we looked at it as a holistic approach of, you know, what serves our community better with this website. It's just not another new website. It's really, there's some thought that was put into it, so thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdella,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
We have some informational items listed in the agenda. And then, is there any new business? Old business? And I have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.